Record. Yes. Okay. Whew. Pressure to record. To remember to record. Yeah. Okay. So what was the second thing you said, Milton? One was the structure of the sukkah that holds up the schach. And what was the other?
Us, the people who are in the schach.
We're in the schach.
Sukkah.
I like in the schach. That's kind of cool. Our head in the clouds. Hence, head in the clouds, since the schach, we often say, represents the clouds of glory. Great. Thank you, Milton, for saying that. Oh, good. Two more people. So actually, this Perek is not anything about those things. It's a completely different switching topic.
There's the...
Go, Rita. Yeah. Rita, yeah, say it again. I didn't hear you.
There's a conflict here because there's a conflict because at 10 o'clock in the morning on Thursday, well, almost every day at 10 o'clock in the morning, there's physical therapy here. So sometimes I have to make a choice.
Yep.
Do I go on the Zoom or do I do the physical therapy?
100%.
So,
well,
you know.
Yep, right. We appreciate when you choose this, but totally understand that it doesn't always happen. So hopefully this will be enjoyable and it'll be worth it. We're going to exercise your mind and your soul, not your body. How's that? Okay, my friends, let's start. Good. Yeah, you like that one? Okay, it's 10:04. I love this Perek, partly because I could make a table. And those who know me know that I love to organize information in a table. And when I was in yeshiva, I was known as the queen of tables. So I did make a table, but first we are going to learn the Mishnayot inside. And I loved, Reb Ezra shared with me that he did a summary of each Mishnah, a one-liner, which I thought was a cool idea. So I'd be really glad to do that. But I didn't want to do that. I wanted to do that with you. I didn't think it was so easy to summarize. So I'd be glad to do it with you. Let me put up, I have the Sfaria of the Mishnah, just a moment. Here we go. No, that's not.
Ezra didn't do it beforehand. Ezra did it with us. As we were learning. We learned the Mishnah, and then he would type in one.
Exactly. That was my plan as well. I did not want to do it beforehand. That's not fun. It's fun to do it together. 100%. I love that idea. But I did create a table, but not that table. This is a table that summarizes what we're going to learn because it's a little complicated. It's a different kind of table. But in addition, I want to do the summary. That was really unclear what I just said. You'll get it when you see it. That really made no sense. Both of them were summaries. Okay. Just to give you an idea of what I am talking about, that I made a table. So this is not a summary of each Mishnah. This is a summary of the different applications that's talked about throughout the whole Perek. But first, what I want to do is learn the Mishnayot. Okay, ready? All right. Lulav va'arava. Did you learn what arava is yet? Was that spoken about yet? Just give me thumbs up or down.
Can you put the text on screen share?
It is. You're not seeing it?
In the table.
Still in the table. Okay, just a moment. I guess I have to unshare and share. Thank you for saying that. You guys weren't. How's that? You see it now? Great, great. Okay, lulav va'arava. Remember that Mishnayot tend to be very terse and succinct, which is why, if you look at the English, the words that are bolded are the actual words in the Mishnah, but then it fills in with a lot of words that are not bolded because it's complicated. Like, what does that mean, lulav? And what does that mean, arava? Each one represents a lot more. Anyway, so can I just get a thumbs up or down if you learned about arava yet? No, okay. You, Bernie did, Milton didn't. Got it. Okay, then I'll make sure that we learn about it. Arava is the willow, the aravos, what we take on Hoshana Rabbah. This is the beginning of the idea of that beating thing that we do, the chibut aravot. So this is a source for that, or a kind of a source for it. Lulav arava shisha v'shiv'a. Sometimes you take the lulav, and sometimes they did the arava. We haven't learned what the arava is yet. That's going to be further on. 6 days and sometimes 7 days. We know that the festival of Sukkot, and I just want to remind people that Sukkot in Israel is 7 days. The Mishnah is only referring to Sukkot in Israel. I'm not addressing what happens outside of Israel, like here in New York. I mean, we could address it, but the Mishnayot are only going to talk about biblical Sukkot, 7 days. Sometimes you take it 6 days, and sometimes you take it 7 days. Ha-Hallel ve'ha-Simcha, reciting Hallel, and a mitzvah of rejoicing. Notice, these are all talking about mitzvot, whether they're rabbinic mitzvot or they're biblical mitzvot. That's what these are referring to. Hallel and Simcha Shmona, 8 days. So what would that mean, 8 days, if somebody wants to unmute?
Shmini Atzeret.
Shmini Atzeret, thank you, Bernie. So 7 days of Sukkot plus 1 day. Remember in Israel, 1 day of Shmini Atzeret, that would be 8 days. Sukkah, the mitzvah of sitting in the Sukkah, which you just mentioned, Milton, and Nisuch HaMayim, did you learn about Nisuch HaMayim? Sorry, just want to know. No. Yeah. So Nisuch HaMayim, there's a special mitzvah of libations of water on the Mizbeach, on the altar. I guess, correct me if I get some of the Hebrew words wrong in English. Those are Shiva. They're the whole 7 days. The whole 7 days of Sukkot, you're supposed to sit in the Sukkah, and there's a special mitzvah of Nisuch HaMayim. Ve'ha-Chalil, so that's kind of cool. You know what a Chalil is? I don't know what that's called in English, but it's kind of a shepherd's flute. It's not done to the side, it's done to the front. In Israel, it used to be mandatory to learn it. All kids learned it. My older kids learned it in school. A Chalil, but I'm not sure what it's called in English. So something about a Chalil, about playing musical instruments, Chamisha v'shisha, sometimes 5 days and sometimes 6 days. Oh, they called it the flute, but it's not a regular flute. Either 5 or 6 days, so a lot of these 6 or 7, 5 or 6 have to do with whether it happens on Shabbat. I'm giving you a heads up. No, it's not a heads up, like a hint as to why you might sometimes take it 6 days and sometimes take it 7 days. All right. So this is a framing introductory Mishnah that's going to give us a lead into the topics we're going to talk about in when we go further. So I know I have to stop sharing in order to share my file. Anybody have a suggestion for an introductory paragraph? Sentence, an introductory sentence. By the way, now you see why I made a table like this. What are practice 5 days? What were practice 6 days? What were practice 7? What were practice 8? So we're going to learn them. I guess that Zoom doesn't know how to share 2 things at once. I don't know why I can't just share my screen, but in any case, who has an idea for introductory, for a sentence for this introductory Mishnah? Any thoughts? Should I go back to it, or is it clear what it was? Bernie, speak, please. I didn't notice you. I apologize. Yeah. I don't hear you. You're muted. Still mute. Murdy, did you want to say something? Sorry, I thought you raised your hand. If you did, you're muted.
How many days is each mitzvah observed?
Nice. Everybody good with that? How many days is each of the mitzvot, I'll say of Sukkot and Shmini Atzeret, because remember 2 of them had to do with Shmini Atzeret, observed. Are we good with that? People like that? Okay. Yeah, agreed. Vivian, you have something to say?
Does it mean that it has to be observed all the days up to the 6th day or all the days up to the 5th day?
Excellent questions. Yeah, excellent questions. So we're going to learn. So it has to do with Shabbat. They pretty much all have to do with Shabbat when it's one or the other. So it depends on where Shabbat falls out. Just to give an example, do we take the lulav and etrog on Shabbat?
No,
We don't. So we
we
know
don't.
that we don't, right? So
But
we're
it's
going
not clear. In the Mishnah, it's not clear.
Absolutely, exactly. The Mishnah is extremely terse and concise, but the next Mishnayot are going to explain. So let's go to that. Those are great questions. Those are exactly the questions that the Mishnah must address. Otherwise, what do we do with that? So continuing. Second, lulav. Remember, when we say lulav, I just want to make it clear, it's referring to the arbat haminim. It's referring to all four, the lulav, the etrog, the arava, the hadassim. It's one, right? We take them together, but it's represented by the word lulav because, of course, the lulav is the biggest, the tallest. So it's the one we see. When would we, lulav shiva ketzad, when or how would we take lulav 7 days? Remember, 7 days of Sukkot. Yom Tov Harishon Shel Chag in the Torah. Chag in the Torah refers to Chag Sukkot. We have a special mitzvah lachgog, to rejoice. And Chag, even though we say Chag Pesach, Chag Sukkot, we even can say Chag Rosh Hashanah, we can even say Chag Yom Kippur, but Chag in the Torah is specifically Sukkot. Yom Tov Rishon Shel Chag Shechal Liot B'Shabbat. If the first day of the Yom Tov of Sukkot falls out on Shabbat, and we know that happens. For example, Rosh Hashanah is Shabbat Sunday and Yom Kippur is Monday, or when we don't have a Shabbat Chol HaMoed, Lulav Shiva Ubishar Chol HaYamim Shisha. So we can read what Sfaria says. Since the mitzvah to take the lulav on the first day is a mitzvah mideoraita, Torah law, therefore it can supersede or override Shabbat. And then you can take the lulav. However, and then it would be 7 days, Shabbat, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. But if the first day occurs on any of the other ones, on the first day, the Chag day, which is Midoraita, meaning there's a Shabbat Chol HaMoed, then you only take for 6 days. Now, is that clear to everybody?
Yeah.
Is that clear? The difference between Shisha B'Shiva, because only on the first day is lulav taking the arbat haminim midoraita. So I want to tell you something. First of all, this is only talking about when the Beit HaMikdash was kayam, was established, when it was kayam, existed, when it was in existence. Because for a few reasons, but basically the rabbis, the sages were worried that people would carry, or they would go to somebody to check the lulav and etrog, which is the same reason why you don't read Megillah on Shabbat, because they were worried about carrying, about moving from reshut to reshut, from a reshut hayachid to reshut harabim, to a public space. We're so used to having an Eruv, but I would imagine that many of us on this Zoom remember a time when there wasn't an Eruv, because we're all past, I think. Yeah. Right? I certainly remember growing up in Boston without an Eruv. I know today there is one, and going to Israel was so huge for me. There was an Eruv, and I know people in Israel didn't even understand about carrying because they were so used to having an Eruv. So therefore, the sages were worried that the people who lived outside of the sanctity, the holiness, the feeling of awe and fear, I don't like to use the word fear, the feeling of awe and holiness, and the knowledgeability, or the knowledge that the Sanhedrin, the people who gathered in Jerusalem, so they would be careful and they wouldn't carry on Shabbat. But know that anytime Sukkot falls out on the first day of Shabbat, we never get to fulfill the mitzvah of lulav mideoraita from the Torah. We only fulfill rabbinic. And there's a whole teaching about how we learn that the other 6 days are rabbinic. We could learn it, but I want to get to the other Mishnah. And by the way, those same years that the first day of Sukkot falls out on Shabbat, hi Sharon, the first day falls out on Shabbat, also Rosh Hashanah falls out on Shabbat. And therefore, there's another mitzvah that we never get to fulfill midoraita that year. Yes. Rabbi Sarah mentioned it, that the years that one thing that's hard for is the years that Rosh Hashanah falls out on Shabbat and Sunday. She actually really misses the shofar blowing on the first day, which I thought was really a beautiful moment, because shofar blowing is so inherent to Rosh Hashanah. So, but the second part is we never get to fulfill it midoraita, which is just an interesting thing to note, but there's really nothing that we can do about it. Okay, let me just see, somebody wrote a chat. Thank you, Bernie, for that. Okay, moving back to the Mishnah. So now we understand why lulav is sometimes shisha and sometimes shiv'ah. And I have to stop share and share again to go back to our other one, to my other file. So now you can see in the table that I made that this is explaining lulav. When is it 6 days? When the first day, which I could actually say Chag, is not Shabbat, then you only do it for 6 days because you do it every day except for Shabbat Chol HaMoed. And when you do it 7 days, is when the first day of the Chag falls out on Shabbat, and therefore the midoraita, the fact that it is a biblical holiday, a biblical commandment, it supersedes Shabbat, right? We were always weighing things. So remember, Shabbat is midoraita, is biblical, and the 6 days are Rabbanit. So if we're saying which is weightier, midoraita, so therefore the sages were so worried that we would override a prohibition of Shabbat of carrying. So therefore it says only in the time of Beit HaMikdash and in the Beit HaMikdash, in other words, in the area around the Beit HaMikdash. Everybody good so far? All right, I bet the next one is going to be about the next thing that it said. Sometimes we do it 6 days, sometimes 7, and it is. Remember what we said, lulav va'arava, shisha v'shiva. Those were our opening words to this. Oh, wait, 1 second, apologies. How are we going to summarize? How do we summarize the second Mishnah about lulav, shisha v'shiva? Anybody have a suggestion for a sentence? Remember, the second Mishnah was lulav, sometimes 6 days and sometimes 7 days. Any thoughts? A nice way to that would relate to it? Yeah, Vivian, any ideas?
Yeah, I think you could say, if the first day of Sukkot comes out on Shabbat, we observe it for 7 days. If it's on another day, it's 6 days.
Okay, so can we say that a little bit shorter, or do you think we should just write it like that? How about first day? Okay, if first day of Chag is Shabbat. Lulav is observed. Does that sound right? Is that what you were saying, Vivian?
Yeah.
Wait 1 second. Or I could say if there's a Shabbat Chol HaMoed, which one feels better? Maybe I'll say if there is a Shabbat Chol HaMoed. Does that make sense to people? I don't want to put words in your mouth.
Okay. You say that.
Okay, how's that?
Okay.
Does that feel? I could say even the lulav is observed for only 6 days. Okay, so it's not explaining why, but it is summarizing when it happens. Okay, all right, great. Oh, it allows me to share this way. Yay. See the Mishnah, everybody? No. Yes? Oh, excellent. Good. I found a shortcut on Zoom. Okay. Now we're now on the third. Remember we said lulav va'arava, shisha v'shiva. So we did a lulav. Now let's understand arava. So what is arava, first of all? Frustrating. It actually explains arava a little bit later. But let's just assume we know what arava is. There is a mitzvah to take the arava. A mitzvah to take the arava. It actually rhymes. How is it that arava, shiva, when is arava, ketzad, how is that? So it's the opposite of what we said for lulav. Remember lulav, we said only if the first day is Shabbat, then it supersedes and overrides Shabbat because it's biblical. יום שביעי של ערבה שחל להיות בשבת, ערבה שבעה, ושאר כל הימים שישה. Okay, so let's read how Sfaria does that. If the seventh day of the mitzvah of the willow branch, by the way, the mitzvah arava is not biblical. So this is really interesting. It's not biblical, it's actually rabbinic. Since on that date is a mitzvah by Torah, that is not true. 1 second. I'm sorry. I read Kahati and Kahati said differently. So I want to check that. It's my Kahati version. Let me just check what he said. Oh, I'm sorry. You know what this is? This is Halacha Moshe Sinai. Are people familiar with that? Halacha Moshe Sinai means it's not written in the Torah. You're not going to find it alluded to, but we consider it the same level as Torah law. That was my mistake that I said it was rabbinic. It was handed down as if Moshe received this orally from God, and it was handed down from them. Halacha Moshe Sinai. It's a halacha, a law that was given to us all the way back to Moshe, but we won't actually see it written anywhere. It doesn't say anywhere in the Torah, Ulakachtem arava shivat yamim. It doesn't say you should take the arava. We still don't know what that means, by the way, to take the arava, but we know it's the willow branches. We know we do something with them. And this is separate from holding the 4 minim, from holding the mitzvah of lulav and etor. Okay. So if the 7th day of the mitzvah of arava, meaning Hoshana Rabbah, everybody remember that? Hoshana Rabbah, there's a plug to come to Shul for Hoshana Rabbah. It's awesome. And it's Sunday, so even those who are working can come, hopefully. Since on that day it is a mitzvah by Torah law and override Shabbat, and the mitzvah of the arava is then for 7 days. But if the 7th day occurs on any of the rest days of the week, meaning there's a Shabbat Chol HaMoed, we don't take the arava on the Shabbat Chol HaMoed. If one of the other days of the festival coincides with Shabbat, that's another way of saying there's a Shabbat Chol HaMoed. So it is true that the mitzvah of the willow branches, on those days I'm sorry. The 7th day is the only day that it's halacha Moshe Sinai. That's the way to understand it. The only day that it is what we call on the level of midoraita, of biblical law, is on the 7th day. So that would be the only day that it overrides. Kahati has a slightly different explanation. So I'm just going to put that aside because this is a good explanation as well. Kahati says we want to show that arava has its own reason for being allowed to supersede Shabbat, and we shouldn't think that it is subsumed under the reason of taking the 4 minim. Remember, we said that lulav, if it happens on the first day, it supersedes Shabbat. And the rabbis could have said the same thing. They could have said, on those years, that's the reason, but they wanted to make sure that we know that the 7th day, it's midoraita. So that actually does not flow together with how Sfaria explains it, but however you want to look at it, on a year when Shabbat Chol HaMoed, there is a Shabbat Chol HaMoed, they didn't do arava on those days. We haven't learned what arava is yet. Okay, new share. Let's go back and summarize. So I'm going to use what Vivian suggested last time and say that Mishnah 3, if the last day of Chag, meaning Hoshana Rabbah, is Shabbat, then Arava is observed for 7 days. If there is a Shabbat Chol HaMoed, Arava is observed for only 6 days. All right? Cool. Okay, I don't have to go off and on share. I learned how to do this. All right. Okay. Now, we still haven't explained what arava is, but we will get there. I promise you, it's in Mishnah Hey. So now the Mishnah is going to explain to us that even though we said that lulav supersedes Shabbat, there was a differentiation between the way they handled the mitzvah of lulav. Okay, let's go off share for just a minute to give you some background. So we said that lulav, they would be very careful in the Beit HaMikdash or in the surrounding area of Beit HaMikdash, And therefore, even if it's Shabbat, the sages knew that the ones who set this up, the ones who wrote the Mishnah, the Tanaim, or it came from the discussions of the Tanaim, that they knew that they would be careful not to carry. Remember, carrying is not within, like in your home, you can carry, in your yard, you can carry, when there's an Eruv, you can carry. They did not have Eruvin all over Yerushalayim like we do today. I don't think they had the technology for that, but you weren't allowed to carry from one shoot. Could somebody tell me what that is in English? I don't know how to say it. Rabbi Glass.
Property.
Okay, but it's not I guess, yeah.
Private to the
Dwelling.
private area to a public area.
No, but it can also be from what, no, the reason he said property is because even from one property private to private, if you have two backyards that don't have a continuous Eruv, you can't carry from one to the other either. You're not allowed to change from reshut to reshut, from one property to another. That's a good way to say it.
How about domain?
Domain, like that, perfect. Love that word. Thank you, Rabbanit.
Yeah, the domain.
Domain is great. Okay, so domain is broader than property here, so that's great because the public domain may not feel like a property.
Yeah.
So what they're going to explain now is that even though lulav overrides Shabbat, they still did things differently so that people wouldn't by mistake carry their lulav with you. So you could imagine they probably brought it ahead of time, right? Does that make sense to people? Let's see. Let's see what they did. Mitzvat lulav ketzad. How is the mitzvah of lulav fulfilled in the temple on Shabbat? Remember, only when the first day of the Chag is on Shabbat. If it's in the middle, because it's not midoraita and not biblical, we wouldn't override. Yom Tov harishon shel Chag shechal liot b'Shabbat. Remember, the first day of Chag is Sukkot. If it falls out on Shabbat, molichin et lulavehen lahar habayit. So then they bring their lulavim, meaning the four minim, not just the lulavim, but the hadassim and the aravot and the etrog. They bring them on Friday to Har Habayit. Like I remember we used to bring things before Shabbat to Shul because you couldn't carry. So we'd bring things before Shabbat, like the talit, the talis, or other things that you wanted in Shul, or like our shoes for Tisha B'Av. When it came out Motzei Shabbat, we'd have to bring them before Shabbat. The hachazanin, so this doesn't mean the chazan, like we think of a chazan, that somebody who leads the services, that they're the attendants, it's a different use of the word. Mekablim mehen, they receive them. Uvesodrim otam, like seder, to make order. They would put them in order. Al gav ha'itzdaba. So it's interesting, they called the itztaba on a bench. In Kahati, he said it was a big chamber that had high ceilings and beams, so it doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter to us. The important thing for us is that they put them in order. I don't think people wrote their names. I don't think they have little tags or sticky notes. I have no clue how they knew which was theirs. I guess one tied it with the red string or one tied it with the blue string. I don't know what they did. They said, I'm number 1, 2, 3, because there were a lot of people there on Sukkot. The hazakinim, this is so beautiful. The elderly people who couldn't push their way, they put them in a different, why? They were given permission to put them in a special chamber due to the concern that they would be injured if the following morning in the rush of people in search of lulavim would kind of bowl them over. I want to tell you something. When I was an intern in Houston, Texas, I spoke about disabilities and about how it can be difficult for people to get to Kiddush. People who had children with disabilities said it was overwhelming for them to bring their children, and maybe it will be possible. Because I spoke about disabilities, they came up to me and spoke to me about that. And I suggested that there would be time to come to Kiddush for like the kids who have, or the people who have disabilities. But I was referring to things like learning disabilities, being overwhelmed by the noise and the chatter and the rush of people. But somebody said, what about people who are either elderly or walking with a walker? You know, I had injuries in my life before I was the age I am today, and I walked with crutches or I walked with something. Believe me, well, what you do is you take a step back. You do not want to be in the rush of people. So we have an amazing, a beautiful, gorgeous precedent right here in the Mishnah that they were so respectful of the elderly people. And I guess it could mean not just elderly, but specifically elderly is what they mention, because that would be representative of people who might have trouble. So because they might do so, they put it in the lishka, okay? ומלמדים אותם לומר, כל מי שמגיע לולבי בידו, הרי הוא לא במתנה. You didn't speak about lulavim at all, right? About that? So perhaps you're not aware, but there is a halacha that says the lulav that you take for your mitzvah, it actually has to belong to you. So here's a caveat to that, which I learned from my father, Lava Shalom. When you're an adult and you're in shul, I know I often do this because many women do not buy their own set of arba minin. And I'm telling all the women or all those who have women at home, please make sure that you suggest that they buy their own set if you can afford it, because it is so beautiful to daven with arba minim. It's just a beautiful, once you start doing it, it's hard not to do it. And so here's the thing. Let's say I want to offer my lulav and etrog, my arba minim, to another woman for her to make a bracha on it and fulfill the mitzvah. I have to gift it to her. And then she has to basically gift it back to me. Now, we don't necessarily have to say the words, but it has to be known that I'm doing that, and then she gives it back to me because she has to own it, which is why as children, my father, especially on the first day of Sukkot, when it's midoraita, he had a separate set for the children, because if you gift it to your child, a child who's under bar bat mitzvah age, they can't technically gift it back to you. So it's an interesting, not everybody follows that, but my father was extremely careful about halacha. So I learned this halacha from a very young age. And they are addressing it in the Mishnah. They actually have to say, everybody, maybe they said it all together. Maybe the Chazanim said, repeat after me, that they would say, here, let me just say, if when it comes tomorrow and there's a rush and somebody gets my lulav, it is a gift from me to them, so they don't have to worry about it. So then it will belong to them. It is a gift for me to. People get up early. The next day, what's the next day? The next day was Shabbat. They got up early and they came. Yeah, okay. So they're throwing them the sets of. I do not understand how this happened. You know, I can imagine like a baseball where you're throwing it through a game. If they had a pitom, the pitom could break. Honestly, I can't figure this. This feels like such a zilzul. Like not, how do you say this? It's like derogatory to start throwing the lavim and a torgim. And they very quickly realized this is not going to work. And what happened? So people would grab it, they'd end up hitting each other. When they saw that this was actually dangerous, so look at what it says here. In the confusion, the people snatched the lavim. In the process, they strike one another. And because they saw that happen, they instituted that every person should take his lulav. They didn't say hers, but a woman could do it as well, and fulfill the mitzvah there. All right, let's summarize this Mishnah. Move on to the next one. Mishnah 4. Mishnah 4, and anybody is welcome to unmute and jump in. Here's something to say. So this would be description of how to fulfill the biblical mitzvah of lulav when the first day of Sukkot is Shabbat. Is that okay? We good with that? Okay, I don't hear any objection, so I'll assume that's okay. You're always willing to object. You're always welcome to object. Okay, moving on to the next Mishnah, 5. Finally, we're going to learn what the Arava, what is the mitzvah Arava? By the way, we don't do it anymore. We don't do the mitzvah Arava because it only was around the Mizbech. Mitzvah Arava Ketzad, how do you fulfill the mitzvah? Makom haya lamata miYerushalayim v'nikam Motza. Today there is a place called Motza Elit and Motza Tachtit, I don't know, but there is Motza Elit, so they kept the biblical name. It's under Yerushalayim. Yordim l'sham u'melaktim misham murbiyot shel Arava. I guess Aravot grew there, willows. U'ba'in zokfim otam b'tzidei hamizbach. Liskov means to stand straight. Zakuf means to stand straight. And they actually, liskov means to stand them up straight around the Mizbech. Think about how beautiful that the Mizbech was framed with all these beautiful, beautiful Aravot. Their heads would bend toward the Mizbech. So I want everybody to imagine how gorgeous it was. The Sukkot was such a fun-filled, happy-filled, gorgeous, glory-filled. the smells, the fragrances, the arbat haminim, the aravot, they didn't have fragrance, but they were beautiful. And then we're going to learn about the chalil. Remember I told you about the flute? Just imagine all the senses were involved on Sukkot. Tak'u v'heriu v'tak'u. They would blow the shofar. Tak'u v'heriu, they sounded a tkiyat. That's tkiyat, tak'u. Heriu from tru'ah. Remember, tru'ah can be shvarim or shvarim tru'ah. That's the original for tru'ah. And then they blew tkiyah again. That sounds very much like Rosh Hashanah. Every day they went around the mizbeach once. So what do we do in our shuls? For those who've been to shul on Sukkot, we go around the bima, or depending on how you do it. Somebody's up on the bima usually. Then on the men's side, we do circles, and on the women's side, but only one day, Ishaim. By the way, we don't hold the aravot. What do we hold? We hold, there's a Sefer Torah in the middle. We hold our Rabbat Haminim. So that's, maybe they held that as well. Ana Hashem Moshiana. Does this sound familiar? Ana Hashem Moshiana. Please God, save us. This is exactly or similar to what we do today. Ana Hashem Matzlichana. These are words from the Hoshanot that we say. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Ani V'ho Hoshiana. Slightly different. That means Ani V'ho, please save us. Ani V'ho. I'm not sure what that means. I and he, perhaps, please save us. So you know we say those as well. We actually use both of those forms in our Hoshanot. Oto hayom, what day was that? That day we've been talking about. What's the day we've been talking about? The seventh day, when it's a biblical mitzvah or halacha l'Moshe Miknai. And that exactly, what's the word? Aligns with, I can't think of the word, but exactly aligns with Hoshana Rabbah. Go around 7 times. It's exactly what happens on Hoshana Rabbah. We go around 7 times. Bishat petiratan. So petira is a word like an iftar is somebody who passed away. So petira is when they finished, when they left. It doesn't mean somebody passed away. It means when they left, when they finished the 7th day. They were done with Hoshanot. They were done with Aravat. They were done with the lulav and etrog. Ma'im omrim yofi lecha mizbeach. It's so beautiful. Yofi lecha mizbeach. It is beautiful, you altar. It is beautiful, you altar. This is so beautiful. It decorates you. It enhances you. Rabbi Eliezer Omer, liya ulecha mizbeach, liya ulecha mizbeach. It is slightly different wording. To God and to you, altar. To Lord, or to the God and to you, altar. Okay. Let us summarize this Mishnah. Finally, we learned what the mitzvah of Aravah is. Detailed description of the mitzvah of Aravah on all 7 days of Sukkot, including when it was completed. Okay, we good with that? Great. Let's go back to our Mishnah. Mishnah Vav. The same thing that was done on the weekday was also done on Shabbat, although remember, only if the 7th day was Shabbat. Does that happen? I don't think that happens. Hoshana Rabbah cannot fall out on Shabbat, the way they set up the calendar. Is that right, what I'm saying? If the 7th day is on Shabbat, that means the first day is Sunday. Can that happen? I thought we set up today. I think the calendar set up that you can't have Hoshana Rabbah on Shabbat because I think so, but I did not check that. I just remember that now. If somebody wants to check that out for me, for some reason that's a memory that I have. Okay. Right? What did we say? They would go down to Motza and they would, every day, I guess, they went and they picked the aravot. Remember the willows, the aravot, they die the most quickly. They dry up because they need a lot of water. So every day, but on Shabbat you can't. So what would they do? They would, lilkot means to glean or to pick them, to pluck them. The word is used in Megillat Ruth. They would do it Erev Shabbat on Friday. They were so busy, by the way. You'll see there's more things. They go to different places. They would put them in basins of gold. They shouldn't dry up and wither and shrivel. וחובטים אותם בקרקע בצידי המזבח, ואותו היום נקרא יום חיבוט חריות. So Rabbi Yochanan ben Broga tells us a new custom, which is our custom today. They would bring palm branches to the temple. By the way, that's a lulav, or that comes from the dekel tree, from the palm tree. This is not the willow, so it's a little different what we do. Remember, we beat the willows, we don't beat palm fronds. They would place them on the ground of the sides of the altar, and that seventh day of Sukkot was called the day of, well, lachbot could mean placing, but it means beating. So there were different explanations for that. All right, so what is this? How are we going to summarize? We're going to summarize the mitzvah of Arava on Shabbat. This of the mitzvah of Arava on Shabbat and the special customs on Hoshana Rabbah. Is that okay? You good with that? Okay. All right. Mishnah 7, 8, 9, 10. We have 4 more Mishnayot to go. This is really very sweet. Miyad, immediately after fulfilling the mitzvah on the 7th day, that's the last time you're going to take the lulav and etrog on the 7th day. Remember, we don't do it, it's on Shabbat, but let's say it's not Shabbat. Shomtim et lulavehen ve'ochlim etrogehen. What do? They take apart the lulavim, they take it out of its binding, and they eat their etrogim as an expression of extreme joy. So I just want to stop and say that seemed really odd to me. Why is that an expression of extreme joy to take it apart? They were excited. It's like, finally, we're giving it to the children to play with. Maybe that's what it means, because it doesn't have as much holiness anymore because we fulfilled the mitzvah. Maybe that's why. I just want to say I made etrog jelly this past year, and that's when I discovered that they put a ton of insecticides on etrogim. And I don't know if the ones that I had were with a lot, but it's not recommended to do that. Also, etrogim don't taste very good. So I don't know how they ate them. Honestly, there's no juice. It's not sweet. I have no clue what this is all about. Anybody can enlighten me? I'd be very happy.
Lots of sugar.
Lots of sugar. So maybe they brought sugar or honey to the shul, wherever they were doing it, and then they gave it out. I don't know. It's just so weird. That's the only Mishnah that felt so odd to me. I didn't really connect with it, but it is in the Mishnah, so I assume it happened. Well, how are we going to summarize this? Children in their excitement on the 7th day. Actually, they wrote excitement and joy. Would undo the 4 minim and eat the etrogim. I honestly, I think it just might be that finally they're allowed to do something with it. And children, as children do, what do? It's tactile. They try to eat the etrog. They try to, undo, because that's what's interesting, is to undo it. If you gave a set of their bat minim to a child, that's probably what they would do. They would undo what are those things called? The ties.
Frond.
The what?
F-R-O-N-D.
Yeah.
No, not the frond. Yes, the frond, but that's not what I meant. What I meant was there's a funny word for the things that you tie. It's like a Aramaic or Yiddish word or something. Yes, Vivian, what did you want to say?
Yeah, I think this shows that children can use anything for a toy.
Nice.
I think it emphasizes the fact that that the lulav and etrog and all of that don't have holiness anymore.
Nice.
Once Sukkot is over,
Beautiful.
It could be a toy for the children. It could be a tzatzua. They could play with it.
Yeah, and actually that's beautiful, because it means that they connect with it, right? Because then the next year they remember they did something fun with it. I love that. You just clicked it into place a lot better for me. Thank you very much. Okay, continuing with the mitzvot that were mentioned in the introductory paragraph. Remember, the introductory Mishnah gave a list of the mitzvot. It was really introducing the mitzvot and when we observe them. These two mitzvot, melamed, how are they 8 days? Well, Bernie already told us, but now we're going to hear what they were. Melamed, it teaches us that not only do we say Hallel Shalem for full Hallel on the 7 days of Sukkot, remember this is in Israel, but also on the 8th day, which is a new Chag actually called Shmini Atzeret. Exactly the same, Kishar Kol Yemot HaChag, just like it was for the whole 7 days of the Chag. So it's interesting. I think Shmini Atzeret has an interesting dual personality, that sometimes it's considered an extension of Sukkot, and it's considered also a new Chag, which we know because we say the bracha of yes, Shechianu. We say the bracha Shechianu, which is a proof that it's a new Chag, and yet it's also so much an extension of Sukkot. I think it has a dual personality. Okay, Sukkah. Okay, so we finished. We explained why it's 8 days. Sukkah Sheva Ketzad. Why is Sukkah 7 days? Right. Oh, so we said Hallel and Simcha are all 8 days. Gamar milechol. Okay. How is it that it's all 7 days? Remember, the last day of Sukkot leads immediately into Shmini Atzeret. Gamar milechol, he finished his last meal. Remember, that's the meal that we say that special prayer on Hoshana Rabbah, that we should be zocher, we should merit to sit in Sukkato shel Leviatan, which is so hot and cool. So it's about sitting in the Sukkah of Leviatan, which I think means under the spread of God's grace, his good graces, because that's where tzaddikim sit, but righteous people, but that's for another story. We could talk about that another time. You shouldn't just take down your sukkah even though you finished eating. Of course, you are getting ready for Chag, so I don't know how you would take it down anyway. But so you don't take it down because you want to leave the beauty. So on Shmini Atzeret, we still see Sukkot all over the place, which is beautiful. So it really means the Sukkah lasts all 7 days, even though you finished eating in it. But what are you allowed to do? Morid et hakelim min hamincha ulemala. So at the time of mincha, which is towards the end of the day, you can take out anything you need from there. Your beautiful, remember the Sukkah, you're supposed to be living in it. So you have beautiful things in it. Your dishes are in it, maybe your chairs and table are in it. It looks beautiful, but you need them for the new Chag. You need them for Shmini Atzeret in your home. So you're allowed to do it for Mincha. Why? Because you want to prepare for the Chag. Mipnei kvod Yom Tov Acharon shel Chag. It's so interesting, right? He calls it the last Yom Tov of Chag of Sukkot. Remember, but it's a dual personality, so it's kind of cool. The reason that we sit in the Sukkah, a lot of us on Shmini Atzeret, you don't do that in Israel. You're not allowed to, because that would be adding to the 7 days. You're not allowed to add. In fact, it's in this week's Parsha, in Nitzavim, it says you're not allowed to add, you're not allowed to take away. You can't make Sukkot 6 days, and you can't make it 8 days. But outside of Israel, when we observe a second day of Yom Tov Sheni Shel Galuyot, then there's a funny kind of gray area. Is it Sukkot? Isn't it Sukkot? So we sit in a Sukkah on Shmini Atzeret, but without a bracha. But on Simchat Torah, we don't. On Simchat Torah, we don't. Okay. So this, if we're going to summarize, Hallel and Simcha, 8 days, and Sukkah, 7 days. Two more Mishnayot. I had so much fun preparing this, you should know. It was really fun. Oops. Click the wrong X. Give me a moment. Okay. Description of the mitzvot of full Hallel and joy are for 8 days. The mitzvah of Sukkah is for a full 7 days. Is that okay? Is that okay?
Yeah.
But I'll just add and prepare appropriately for the last Chag day, last day of Chag, because that was also in there. Okay, great. Do you see this? Did you switch to Mishnah or it didn't? It did. Okay, perfect. Now I know how to do it. It's in the same.
Yeah.
It's in the same Chrome window. Okay, finally figured that out. Okay, 9. This is complicated. Nisuch hamayim ketzad. What does that mean? Remember, we also said nisuch hamayim, that it's 5 or 6 days. Slochit zahav. I'm going to read it in English. It's a little complicated. It's too long for me to read in Hebrew and English. With regard to the rite of water libation performed in the temple. Remember, this is the Chag when we ask for water, when we're judged for water. So we pour water and wine are poured as symbolizing, I guess, our thankfulness to God for that. How is it performed? One would fill a golden jug with a capacity of 3 log with water from the shiloh, from the, what's it called here? Yeah, right, the shiloh. Anybody did that? Has anybody walked through Me'arat Chizkiyahu, the cave of Chizkiyahu, in the water? It's a beautiful, beautiful tool. I just recommended it to someone who went with their 3 children and they loved it. You're actually walking in water up to your knees or up to your thighs. It's just a lovely thing to do. It's in a cave, and that was water that came to Jerusalem. I don't know if it's used today as well. When those who went to bring the water reached the gate of the water. Oh, yes, Lance, did you want? We just don't have a lot of time. Can you hold your question until the end? Because I want.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay. So called because the water of the libation was brought through this gate leading to the temple courtyard. So there was a shortcut. They sounded tkiya, trua, and another tkiya as an expression of joy. Remember, they did that also around the Arava. The priest ascended to the ramp of the altar and turned to his left. So this is an explanation of how he walked up. There's a whole explanation in the Gemara. If you read Kahatza, you can read it. Went to the right, went to the left, turned, went down, go down a different way. So it's a very detailed explanation of that. Turned to the left, there were 2 silver basins there where he poured the water. Rabbi Yehuda says, actually, they were made of limestone, but they were blackened because of the wine that will be poured in, and therefore they look like silver. To me, that means they look like silver that tarnished. So I don't know what was so awesome about that, but that's my own little beef with silver that you have to polish it. The 2 basins were perforated at the bottom with 2 thin, it actually says like chotem. Chotem is a nose. It looked like a protrusion, like a nose. One of the basins was used for wine libation and had a perforation that was broad, and one that was used for the water libation had a perforation that was thin. Look how few words it said in Hebrew, but in English there are many words.
Yeah.
Why? So that the flow of the water and the wine, which do not have the same viscosity, would conclude simultaneously. It was kind of beautiful that they prepared it that way. One was broad because wine flowed slower. It was also different then. Their wine was much more viscous. The basin to the west of the altar was for water. The one for the east was for wine. And they already said, but if one did pour the contents of the water into the wine or the wine into the water, the diavad after the fact to fulfill the obligation, because it didn't disqualify. This is important to put in the Mishnah. That's usually the kind of discussion that happens in the Gemara. This happened in the Mishnah. So it must have happened that there was a time when that took place. So they felt it was important enough to put in the Mishnah. Rabbi Yehuda said the basin for water libation was not that large. Rather, one would pour the water with the vessel that had capacity for 1 log on all 8 days of the festival, and not only so there's a machloket. And the appointee says to the one pouring the water into the silver basin, raise your hand so that his actions would be visible. As one time, a Sedusi priest intentionally poured the water on his feet and didn't do it through the basin because they didn't believe he had to do it. As the Sadducees did not, is that how I pronounce it? I hope so, did not accept the oral tradition. Remember, halacha le Moshe. Yeah. This was halacha that came down from Moshe, but it wasn't written in the Torah. And in their rage, all the people pelted him with their etrogim. So that reminds me of a scene from Life of Brian, for those who didn't see Life of Brian. So it's a great movie, which is it's a little not so respectful, but also very funny. But anyway, there's a scene where they pelt somebody. So it's just a weird thing that they would pelt him with etrogim, but they were so angry that he didn't fulfill the mitzvah correctly. So they said, raise your hand, show us that you're not pouring it on your feet, you're pouring it into the basin. So this is so interesting because it's not usually, the Mishnah is not usually so detailed. Okay, I want to get to the last one. So how are we going to summarize this? So I guess it's detailed description of how the water libation, the nisuch hamayim and the nisuch hayayin. Is that okay?
Yeah. Okay.
Yep. It really is a detailed description. of the water libation and wine libation and special customs around it, which have to do with just that one. Okay, Mishnah 10. כמעשהו בחול, כך מעשהו בשבת, אלא שהממלא מערב שבת חבית של זהב שאינה מקודשת. So Rabbi Yehuda is continuing. So this is again Misuch HaMayim, but when it's on Shabbat, as its performance during the week, so is its performance on Shabbat, except that on Shabbat, one would not draw the water. You're not allowed to carry it, and you're allowed to draw it, I think. Instead, before Shabbat, one would fill the golden barrel that was not consecrated for exclusive use in the temple. I'm just putting you on mute because we have some background noise. In the temple from the Mei Shiloach, and he would, not Mei Shiloach, the Mikvat Shiloach or Marat Shiloach, he would place it in the temple chamber and draw water from there only on Shabbat. So it was already put in place. Now you're not allowed to leave that water exposed. Why? Because they were worried that a snake went in it and may have deposited poison in the water. So interesting. One would fill the jug with water from the basin in the temple courtyard, as exposed wine or water is unfit for the altar. Just as it is prohibited for people to drink from them due to the potential danger, so too they may not be poured on the altar. So this is I just have one more thing to show before we leave. I'm just literally running out of time, so give me a moment. How to fulfill the mitzvah of water libation on Shabbat. And I just want to go back to this. Let's look at the summary that I made for you. 5 days, 6 days, 7 days, 8 days. This is exactly what our whole Perek is all about. Lulav and Arava is never 5 days. It could be 6 days. Remember, because you take, if there's a Shabbat Chol Moed, then the Lulav is only taken on the 6 days that are not Shabbat. And Arava is taken for 6 days if the last day, if there's a Shabbat Chol, no, that's not a helpful thing to say. If the last day wasn't Shabbat, but you take it all 7 days. If the first day is Shabbat, you would take Lulav 7 days. If the last day was Shabbat, you would take Arava 7 days. Halel and Simcha are always 8 days. All the days of Sukkot plus the day of Shmini Atzeret. Sukkah and Misuch HaMayim are all 7 days. You dwell in a Sukkah, you have to do all 7 days. Water libations, remember, all they had to do was bring the water before Shabbat, but you were allowed to do it on Shabbat. Included wine libation. I guess it's subsumed under Misuch HaMayim. And the Chalil, so you'll read about, I think that in next Perek, I think is when it describes what the Chalil. I didn't explain it to you. I'm leaving that for the next person to describe it, but it's joyous, obviously. And that was having to do with Simchat Beit HaShoeva, not on Yom Tov and not on Shabbat. So in that case, it could be 5 days. But if the first day of Yom Tov is Shabbat, then you have 6 days, because then you'll have Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. But if Yom Tov falls on a weekday and you have a Shabbat Chol Moed, then there are 2 days you don't play the flute and have the Simchat Beit HaShoeva, so it'll be 7 minus 2 equals 5. 11:01, I did it. We did it, not just me. Yes, any thoughts? Lance, and anybody who needs to leave, of course you can leave.
Okay, behind me is the city of David. Can you see it?
Yes, I'm just
The city of David contains the Siloam spring that you're reading about in the Talmud.
That's what it's called.
Siloam, right.
That was Mishnah, by the way. That wasn't Talmud.
Mishnah, okay, fine. And the contention of the archaeologists digging in the city of David is that the temple practices could not be done without that spring.
Nice.
Which means that the Temple Mount, the Wailing Wall, the contention between the Israelis and the Arabs, all that is absolutely futile nonsense.
Okay.
If you accept what the Mishnah says as having some value. The other thing is, I was reading an article which I called up by Rabbi Zev Farber. You know him, right?
Yeah. Is it short? Because I know the time is finished.
I'm only saying, he quoted the exact same Mishnah as you did in this class. And the
Great.
article is fascinating because
So
there are
put the
actually two
article,
articles.
why don't you put into the chat, then people can look it up. Great.
Do I have time?
Put it in and I'll speak for one more minute.
Okay. Let me try
All
to
right,
get
my
the,
friends. Yeah.
hold on.
Okay, well, thank you very, very much for joining and on this learning, this teaching of the whole Masechet. I have a dream that we'll do Masechet Yoma, maybe another year, which is the Masechet that describes Yom Kippur. I love it. I think it's beautiful. There are 8 Perakim in that Masechet. Maybe that'll happen another year. I love that we're learning Mishnah together. That feels a little different from what we often do at the Beit. So that just felt like just a lovely idea that Reb Stephen and Reb Ezra came up with, and really appreciated the opportunity to share with you today. All right, so do you have it?
Yeah, I got it, I think.
Right,
Let me
so
just
put it
double
into
check. Give me
the-
1 second to double check.
If anybody has something to say, you have an opportunity.
Yeah, take 1 minute. I just want to make sure this is.
Let me just say hello and goodbye to everybody who's still on. Howard and Carolyn. I guess Rita got off at some point. I don't see her. Maybe she went to her physical
All right,
therapy.
let
Carol.
me,
Nice to have you, Rabbanit
Here
Gloria.
we
Graham,
go.
nice to see you. Thank you, Lance. iPhone.Moshe. Oh, very nice. Thank you. Milton, Rabbi Glass, and Vivian, who's not on it. She's on, but not. Well, thank you so much. Okay. Let's see if I have that. In
Yep,
the Torah
that's it.
document. Fantastic.
that's
All
it.
right,
Just
friends.
click on the blue and you'll go right there and favorite it, read it. There's also a second essay by Rabbi Farber. He is brilliant. I love him. He also has a number of essays that
All right,
are absolutely
that's-
brilliant.
Okay.
So
Thank you for
that's
the
it.
shout out. All right, everybody. Be well. Have a great day.
Shana
Bye-bye.
Tova.
Vakasha. Bye-bye.